can't tell you enough, bro. Like the shit that you put out is like amazing. Like
Appreciate
it helped. Like it fucking helped me so much. Like right when I got into the industry, I was like really trying to figure out like how the fuck do I get really good at this really quickly, you know?
it.
And I was just like fucking listening to sales podcasts, buying audiobooks, you know, reading sales books, watching YouTube videos, and it all helped. Like
Hmm.
all the little things helped, but it wasn't as detailed, like to the T of what you're putting out. Like for us, you
Yeah.
know, like it's like a fucking cheat code. Like you just
Yeah.
fucking go straight into it.
Yeah.
And you just tell us how to be a fucking the best LO. Like
Yeah.
it's just from the beginning to the end. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's like, dude, it's great.
Yeah.
It's been great, dude.
Yeah, you supermodel thing. Man, that ass busting out the bottom. I'ma lose my mind in it. Crazy, I'ma do la obligado.
I started like researching some stuff, some sales stuff, but it's like a little outdated, like the techniques, things like that. And like you covered all of that. Like as soon as I saw like some of your content, I was just like, this is what I need. This is exactly what I needed, bro. And then I just like started implementing little things every day. Like I would just, you know, listen to your stuff. Like on my drive to work, it takes me 30, 40 minutes. So I was just
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. Every day, just listen to your shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Work, bro.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah. That's cool, man. That's real cool. Like I think you did the secret formula, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, the secret formula. Yeah,
And then it shows you kind of like the system and then the process, or kind of creating your own system, kind of developing the mindset to go into it, the origination and then the closing. Yeah.
right,
So
right.
like with the mindset, or at least the process, I think we can elaborate on that right now. Just going through your email, I think the very first one was about like the consistency, right? Like you get to a point where you want to avoid the roller coaster income, right? Like one
Right,
month you're on fire, and then what happens is sometimes you'll just kind of gradually go down, and then another month you're on fire, right?
right.
And and that definitely did happen to me. When I first got into real estate, as you probably already seen in the content, I started off as a telemarketer, 20 years old, and then back then they didn't need an MLS license, right? So they didn't really care about if you knew what the verbiage meant. They didn't really care about
Yeah,
compliance, things like that. Whereas now they do, and so even though it's a little bit more complex, still the grind is the same, where you gotta come into an atmosphere where you don't really know what's going on, right? And then
right, right.
you have veterans that some are winning and some are not. And I think you mentioned there's probably maybe about three or five that you notice are at a consistent level just every month, right?
Right.
And if the goal is to get on that level and that frequency, what's good is that you've identified who those five people are. And so one thing that I did coming in, because when I came in, like I was bald headed, I was young and dumb, and when I came into corporate America in Orange County, no one actually wanted to interact with me,
Right.
the way I dress and the way I talk. And so it was kind of hard to ask for help. Plus that, and I was an introvert, right? So I didn't really go up to people to be like, "Hey,
Right.
man, how you doing?" Unless I related to them on like music or dress style or age.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and it sucked because I felt like I was holding myself back from getting into the networks that I needed to. And so what I did was I kind of just adapted it in a way where I watched them from afar,
Hmm.
and I started to mirror the things that they were doing, as far as successful habits. And so
Right.
like these people who are consistent, you might notice that they always work 12 hours a day, 13
Yeah.
hours a day. And that's a
Yeah.
hard sacrifice, right? You're like, damn, man, I don't want to do that, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to grind that hard. And so I chose to try and figure out a way to hack that system. And so like I didn't necessarily need to do 12 hours a day until I got into management. Management is where you're grinding it out,
Right.
because you're overseeing a team, so it's not just your pipeline, it's everyone's pipeline. And so I'm going to share with you some of the ways that can hopefully help you get it done within a 9 hour to 10 hour window. but help you orchestrate it to where, you know, the months you need extra money, that's when you have the choice to go above and beyond the 12 hours, right? Or do the weekend. And so, you know, first off, with the way that, like, the access that you have, because it's portfolio leads, that's money, bro. Like, you don't necessarily need to go and purchase if you don't want to. But if you do end up going into purchase, it's going to be a different transition. So it's going to take a minute, right? And if it's important that you consistently earn the income in the interim, you have to master one first, right? Before juggling both. And so the system that you may have in place, like, I think you had mentioned, you go in real early and then cut out probably maybe around 3 or 4 to beat traffic and get home and then balance the family life, right?
Right.
Where that can work. You just have to look at your licensing, for example, and then also the busiest times of where you're funding the most loans. So if you look at your past, let's say 6 months of fundings, and then you notice you're doing a heavy amount of business in the East Coast, then those hours are actually perfect, right? Whereas if you're finding more traction in the West Coast area, then you may be leaving a big pocket of business on the table because by the time you're gone, they're actually just coming home. Does that make sense? Now they're open, right? But so I don't think there's any real way around working in the important hours. Power hours are actually 4 to 7 p.m. You know, regardless if you're doing business on the West Coast or the East Coast, is because that's a pocket of time where people are less distracted. Makes sense? And so I think the challenge is, first off, you have to kind of get the momentum running to where it's just an engine, right? And so sometimes in order to do that, you just need to be in the right place at the right time. And if that means, you know, maybe adjusting the hours like that, just to see what the return would be, right? Like, if you haven't done it before, and I would say try that for maybe 2 weeks or a month. Talk to, you know, a family or make certain moves. But if you see a huge pickup from 4 to 7 and you didn't realize that because you left, you know, a little bit early, then that could be your unlock for more business, which will create the consistency that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I mean, I talked to my manager. I was asking him, like, okay, so because I tried different shifts. I always try to figure out, how can I bring in the most business? How can I have most activity in the smallest amount of time frame? So I've done the 7 to 6 o'clock shift. And then I tried, you know, early morning 5 to 3 o'clock shift, like just trying to balance it all out. Tried the 6 to 4. And what I've noticed is when I'm starting earlier, there's no distractions, right? Like, I'm the first one on the floor, and, you know, there's a few people, and it's quiet. You get your emails done, you knock it out, take calls, right? And so what I did with my manager is we kind of like figured out what states or what licensing to kind of supplement the fact that I'm going to do a short earlier shift. So I did a lot more East Coast. I'm heavier on the East Coast. Okay. Still have, you know, a few in the mid, but I think I did exactly what you just said. Like, I'm trying to hack that amount of time, because I know you've went over that, trying to, like, you know, condense the amount of time, but with the most productivity. And so that's exactly what I did. I was just trying, and I've noticed it works. Like, when I'm there at 7, I'm like goofing off around 7:30, still talking to my, you know, coworkers, you know, about what we did, blah blah blah, and then by like 5, everyone's just like ready to dip out. I got traffic to think about. It's just like a headache, bro. So that's why I like this earlier thing, and then, like, the time to, you know, spend time with fam. Yeah,
for sure. You know, when I got into the industry, I was having my first child, and she's going to be 16 this year. So it was a minute ago, you know, and it's crazy because you're going to look back at these times where you're like, man, I try to juggle and I try to make so much moves, and it's going to be a very humbling experience, you know, because what you're going through right now, what you're trying to figure out, it's all going to make sense as long as you continue kind of pursuing it, right? It'll all kind of just click. And so whatever time schedule you do fit in, if your manager is working with you to understand like your KPIs and the highest productivity, return on productivity. And so, for example, if you're doing a lot of your outbound calls, are you doing outbound calls, or is it just dialer?
No, we're doing outbound calls, and the market's tough right now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So like the condensing portion of it, what can help you save a ton of time, because the portfolio is huge. You know, they already know your name, right? The process is much faster. But when you kind of organize the way that you originate, you're able to adapt it to your time zone and availability, right? So if you, for whatever reason, have to do outbound calls at like 2:00, it'd probably be best to maybe focus towards the East Coast, right?
Right.
But strategically plan where you're actually leaving a message. Like we got at my company, we have this thing called Slide Dial. You guys have that?
What is it?
It's a pre-recorded voice message that I can, in my CRM, I can blast to 50 contacts and it goes straight to their voicemail as if I called them. You guys have that?
Yeah, we have something like that. Okay,
cool. And so what I'll do is I'll strategically do that around noon their time. So it would be probably about 9-10, and I'll have these pocket, because every single day I'm just looking for 10 connections. That's it. Right. And so a lot of people say, hey, I need to make 100 dials, or I need to do 150 dials. And the problem with that is, though, is that that's a big number. Right. And then we always kind of feel this sense of stress because it's like, damn, I still got 150 dials. Right. Damn, I got 100 more dials. When in all reality, all you're looking for is just basically 10 new connections or 10 leads to farm every day. Right. Every single day. And whether you get those 10 connections through 10 dials or 150 dials, that's really where it's at. Like, because the business side of it, like being in management, I understand the business is going to tell you protocol, right? Business is going to tell you, hey, you need to do 300 originations, or I'm sorry, outbound calls every day. You need to do 2. So they're going to have their own system. But but when you create a system that you're more emotionally tied to, you don't look at it as instruction or guide. You get to a point where soon that just is noise. You know, they'll tell you to do this, but they won't mess with you because your production is actually outweighing. You know what I mean? Like your production is fine, and that, I think that's where you want to get to. You know, being the top 5-10% of your floor, you're probably already getting that kind of treatment where they kind of just let you do you, right? Yeah. They're not necessarily on you. And if you have the relationship stacked up with processing and operations, then you position yourself to delegate where you don't necessarily need to spend your 9-hour window of time to do the redundant shit, right? Like you're not doing the admin tasks. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But again, it's just a matter of understanding, you know, the resources that they give you, which I would imagine is a good amount. So you send it down the line. So you're kind of guiding traffic. You're almost like a business owner. Does that make sense?
Right.
And you have all these support roles, but the support roles are called loan officer assistant, junior processor, VOE specialist. Does that make sense?
This is what you call a flip. 10 keys from a car to brick. Bentley from his mama whip. KOD, he hard as